So this is where we left off, right? We finally started a new day, right? It's now Wednesday, June 5th. So let's see what we have here. We have that we must pay landlord's property, which is contract number 123654, okay? We paid them 4 months worth of rent for a total of $6,000. We also had to do a rent deposit for $1,500. So in grand total, we made a total payment of $7,500. Okay? Now in this case, right, we paid a total of 4 months. Now in this case, when we understand how to expense, we're only going to expense for the current month that we are in the current accounting period. So in this case, right, I can only properly journalize that I'm using only the current month of June. However, I bought 4 months in advance. That's going to mean that, I bought 4 months in total, and therefore I have 3 months of prepaid rent. Okay, I have paid already in advance for 3 months worth of rent. So that means landlord properties must, provide me through those 3 extra months without any pay. Okay, that's the contractual agreement. And of course, I made a deposit for $1,500. So in this case, I also wrote my very first check. Okay, so there's a lot of things that are going on here in this exact transaction. So let's first figure out the first few things is, as I mentioned before, right? We bought a total of 4 months worth of rent for $6,000, right? How much is it going to cost me for 1 month? How much is it going to cost me for 1 month worth of rent?
1,500.
1,500. Good, right? So in this case, right, I need to recognize the current month that I'm in, because when I paid for this, right, my assumption is that my rent is going to start effectively in June, okay, or on June 5th, right? So therefore, I must recognize the current month's rent expense for the month of June. Okay. I also have to recognize that I made a payment in advance, so I have some prepaid rent. Okay. And I also made a deposit. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at the chart of accounts. Do we have all of these that exist? Let's see. What is our current rent expense account? Do we have a rent expense account?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Right? 62,000. Do we have a prepaid rent or anything that has the word prepaid in it?
I don't think so.
Let's take a look at my assets.
Oh, there is prepaid accounts.
Pre-
What do you call it?
Because in this case, right, I paid 3 months worth of rent. Can I touch rent?
No.
But in this case, I own the 3 months of rent, right? So in this case, because you can't touch rent, it's still an owed service because you made advance payments for it. So in this case, we're going to treat this as prepaid accounts. Okay. All right. And of course, we made a rent deposit. Do we have deposits?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Okay. And of course, because we're going to be writing our very, very, very first check, that money is going to come directly out from our checking account. So let's go ahead and properly journalize that. Okay. So I have all of those accounts. And we have our checking account because the money's going to come right out from that. Okay. So rent expense was account. I already forgot the account number.
62,000.
62,000. Thank you. 62,000. Okay. My prepaid accounts was 18,600. Deposit was 18,700, and last of course checking, which is we can look right above 10,100. Okay. So now we need to list out what was involved. So in this case, right, rent expense only involves the current month that I'm currently using the rent for. So in this case, we talked about it, right? If I bought a total of 4 months and it cost me a total of $6,000, right? And I'm going to divide that by 4 to let me know how much 1 month rent of expense is for. And it's for 1,500. Okay? And of course, if it's for 1,500, I still have 3 months remaining, right? Because I paid for a total of 4 months. So therefore, that should be 4,500, and the rent deposit was for 1,500. So in grand total, I should be writing a check amount for the grand total of $7,500. Okay? So this one is for your rent. Now, in this case, right, I wrote a check. What check number did I write? Or how do I know I wrote a check? What must I use in order to get the information I need to properly write a check?
With the check number.
Okay, and where do I find my check number?
It's 1501, right?
Yes, but where did you find that number?
CH rec.
CH Rec, which is your check register. So if I click my check register, this is my checks that I got from the bank. So that means if I'm going to be writing my very first check, it's check number 1501. So the date that I wrote it's going to be June 5th. Okay? And how much did I write the amount for? 7,500. Who did I write this out to? Well, who's the person I wrote this check out to?
Landlord.
Landlord properties. Okay, so that's what I'm going to put here. Landlord properties. Okay. Now, if you would like, you can have an extra column here on the right side saying what the note is for. You can say this is for rent. Okay, but in this case, I personally don't need it. A note for what this transaction is, but if it helps you to keep yourself more organized, and this is true when you do have your actual legitimate physical check register book, right? You have that little miniature ledger that gives you the notes on what this transaction was for, or this check was written out for. So in this case, you can if you want. If you, for me personally, I don't think I need it. So there you go, and I'm going to go ahead and format this the way I like it. Okay, and there we go. $7,500 is what I wrote, and I used check number 1501. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and put in my description, right? This is what's going to be the most important information that you're going to be having is number 1, who is the person that you wrote the check out to? In this case, Landlord Properties. Okay. Now, in this case, what did you write this check for? And you can write for rent expense, okay? 4 months rent, right? You don't need to put a deposit because it's pretty clear, right? If you're paying landlord properties for rent, right? It's straightforward right here. It tells you that you also made a deposit in your journal. Okay. And other things like you could do is have your contract number. So contract number. So you have a reference that this was for 654, excuse me. So that contract number, right? So when that contract number expires, right, then you would sign another contract if you want to continue your rent in that location. And last but not least, I also need to make a note of what check I used. In this case, I used check number 1501 to pay for the rent. Okay? And there we have it. That was our transaction here. Okay? Now that I completed my journal, I must update my ledger. Okay? And I think I forgot one more thing to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Update your ledger. Okay. So, first thing that we have here is rent expense, which is going to be an operating expense. Cost of goods sold, operating expense. Rent expense is account number 62,000, and that means it is right here. 62,000. Okay. June 5th, excuse me. We bought in this case, this is rent expense. So this is going to be rent for month of June. Okay. Once again, we've had this transaction on the first general journal, and we debited our account because we paid for rent expense. Okay. This expense is what we had to do in order to do our business, so we had to spend this money, which makes this a expense account. Okay. Next thing that we have in line here is going to be our prepaid accounts. Okay. So prepaid accounts, okay, is an asset. It's an intangible asset, right? Because we made advance payments to landlord properties. And their obligation to us is that they owe us rent. So in this case, this is me owning rent. Okay? So this should be towards the bottom here. I got my truck. Here you go, prepaid accounts. 6.5. And because this is my prepaid amount, I'm going to go ahead and make a note saying this is advanced payment for 3 months of rent at $1,500 per month. Okay. General journal number 1, and because I traded cash in for an intangible asset, right? I'm contractually, legally binding that a landlord property owes me 3 months worth of rent. Okay, so therefore, let's confirm that. 1,500 times 3 gives you 4,500. So therefore, my account balance in my prepaid accounts is $4,500. Okay. And again, that matches my journal too. And it's on the debit side. Okay. So then, let's see what happened next. We have a deposit. Okay. Here's your deposits, right? So again, usually rent, when you have a deposit, this money is generally supposed to give usually it's a month of advance payment to cover for any incidents where you can't afford rent that month. You can use the deposit there for any fixtures or for any problems that happens with the rent place. So if something happens, like a leak in the building, something like that, that's what the rent deposit's going to be going towards, is any basically emergency expenses. Now, if nothing happens and you properly pay your monthly bills, this money is supposedly to come back to you. But most cases, if not, likelihood of the landlord to give you the money back is almost near impossible. So this deposit, the difference of having a deposit versus a prepaid account is that the deposit's supposed to come back to you, right? But in this case, especially when we have to deal with the landlord, likelihood of that deposit is not going to come back to you. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and make a note. Rent deposit, 1 month advance, add 1 month payment. So that's going to be $1,500. And of course, this transaction happened on the 1st. And that is my account balance in my deposits account. Okay. Last thing on my list here is I wrote a check. Okay? I wrote a check. So therefore, I decreased my money value. So, again, it is the 5th of June, and I wrote a check. Now, in this case, all the information that I want to put in here is just my check number, okay? Because my check number can tell me a lot of things if I go to my check register, right? I go to my check register and look up check number 1501. It tells me the exact date, the exact amount, and the exact person I paid. So is it necessary to have to excuse me. Is it necessary that you need to flood your ledger with so much information when I can, eliminate that by putting references? So in this case, check 1501 can basically tell me a lot about a transaction by looking up that exact check number. So in this case, that's all I need for this reference, is that I wrote a check number and it was for 1501. Of course, this transaction also happened on the very first page here of the journal. And this time, right, instead of debiting my account because I did not increase my cash flow, I spent money, right? I spent $7,500 for rent. So that's going to drop my account balance to be from $23,625 down to $16,125. Okay? So again, rent expense, and rent already is going to be one of the biggest portions of your business expense, especially when you have to pay months in advance and et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is normal for starting up a business. Okay? And that's the last thing I have to deal with in my ledger account. Okay? So now I have a running balance in my checking account for $16,125. Okay? And that's good to know, because then at the end of the day, right, if I'm going to be writing another check, then it's going to decrease my amount. But I actually have enough for whatever I'm going to be buying. Okay? So that's the purpose of doing your ledger accounts, is you're going to know how much money you should have at the end of each account at any given specific point in time. Okay? Is everyone good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is going to be the first time we dealt with a person, right? We went into a contractual agreement saying, if I pay you this money, then you owe me service. So in this case, what kind of service does landlord provide me or provide Bob?
Is it the building?
Correct, rent, right? So what do we categorize landlord properties as? Are they a customer, vendor, or employee?
Vendor.
They are 100% going to be a vendor because they are providing us with something, right? Some kind of service, whether it's products, whether it's to fix the building, it's whether to provide rent. So in this case, this is the first indicator that we must use our subsidiary ledger, okay? Because we have a contractual agreement, right? And we are still because we made an advance payment, we are being owed service. Okay? So that's definitely something you definitely want to keep track of, that you are being owed service. Okay? So I'm going to go down to my subsidiary ledger. Okay? Since we talked about it, they are a vendor to us. So therefore, we're going to go check out the vendor list. Okay? Now here's a huge hint to you. The vendor list is in alphabetical order. So we're dealt with landlord properties. So LLL. There's Las Vegas. Landlord properties. Here it is. Okay. Today is the 5th. Okay. The notes that you need to make is going to be whatever the contractual agreement entailed. So you purchased. Okay. Purchased 4 months of rent at $1,500 per month. Okay. You also had a rent deposit for $1,500. Okay. And that's pretty much it. That's as far as you can put in there, right? That you purchased a total of 4 months. Okay. And that you had to pay a rent deposit. Now, the invoice number is going to be whatever contract number you have, right? Because that's going to be more or less your invoice, right? The contract number was 1236654, I believe. Okay, so that's your invoice number because that's where it's telling you your details in regards to the package that you bought or the rent that you paid for, and of course the amounts are all going to be included. Okay, post reference. In this case, this post reference right here is also going to be the one that you locate this transaction in your general journal, not your general ledger, general journal. So in this case, general journal number 1 is when this transaction has occurred. Now, terms. Were we given terms for rent?
No.
No, but the assumption is you're probably going to have to make the rent payment 30 days from now. Okay, but in this case, you already paid 4 months in advance. So in this case, you will not have terms until your 4 months is over. So in this case, no terms, so that means there's no discount due date or an actual due date. Because at the end of the day, right, especially rent, there are no discounts when it comes to rent. Okay. Did I make any advance payments prior to knowing landlord properties? In this case, no. I had to get the rent, right? But we have prepaid rent. That's not the issue. So in this case, this column is only if before the transaction happened, did we have to make an advance payment prior knowing this individual? In this case, no. At that time of service, we had to pay up straight up front $7,500. So that's what the invoice amount, that's what the contract said the agreement was going to be, that you're going to pay $7,500 worth of rent. Okay? And of course, last question here is: there's no returns and allowances, obviously. You're not taking any discounts. But this column here, did I pay for the rent? And in this case, yes, you did. You did pay. Now, this is where you have to also include here that I'm going to also include how I paid. I paid with check number 1501. Okay, so that gives me proof that I made a payment and that this is the details into what the contractual agreement was for to equal the 7,500. Okay, so this tells me right here by putting all this information in this vendor's profile, right? That tells me why I use this vendor. That tells me what did the vendor offer me. And then this also tells me did I make a payment and how did I pay. Okay? And that's how we fill out the subsidiary ledger. Now I'm going to teach you one more thing here, which is going to be utilizing this accounts payable. In this case, right, this one's pretty straightforward because if I had a contractual agreement that I owed $7,500, but I made a payment using check number 1501, do I owe landlord properties anything? No, I don't because I already paid off what I owed. But in this case, right, because we are going to be using this table for instances where we will be owing vendors, this formula is something that you need to know, especially when you're looking into Excel. But if you're not, you're going to have to kind of think for it yourself. If I had an agreement of what I owe and I made a payment to it, then you automatically know you don't owe them anything. But how we figure this formula out is it's going to be your total invoice amount, okay? Which in this case is 7,500, okay? Things that will affect this amount is going to be if you made an advance payment or if you paid before prior knowing to this amount here, that's going to reduce your amount in that you owe, right? If you made a deposit beforehand, then it will affect the overall amount that you owe. Okay, but in this case, again, the deposit that we're talking about or this advance payment that we're talking about happened at the time you paid the entire amount. So you didn't know prior beforehand, or they didn't request or ask you to give a down payment before paying for the total amount. Okay, so that's the difference there. Okay, other things that will also affect your overall invoice amount is going to be your returns and allowances, right? That will definitely decrease it, right? You will the discount will also decrease the amount that you owe as well. And last but not least, a payment is going to 100% decrease the amount that you owe. So at the end of the day, right, it's going to be your total invoice amount, subtract prepaid, subtract returns and allowances, subtract discounts, and subtract any payments. And that's going to give you your overall formula to solve for how much you owe this person. And in this case, because I owed them 7,500, but I made a payment to them for 7,500, I owe them $0. Okay? This formula I will talk about constantly as we look at for more examples when we do actually owe money, okay? Then this formula will start making more sense, okay? And that's how we use the subsidiary ledger. Okay? So therefore, now that we did our journal, right? We completed our general ledger and we completed our subsidiary ledger. So therefore, this transaction is complete. All right? Okay. Last thing I forgot to mention from the previous one before we went on break was we deposited money into the checking account, right? We deposited the $2,000 that we gained from the sale of the asset, right? So in this case, that's what I forgot to do is to make that deposit. So then now in my checking account, I should have the exact amount because I deposited the money at the end of the day. Right? So that means we can now move on to the very next transaction. Okay? So let's see what happened next.
Hold on, I kind of missed it. Did we put down the deposit?
Yes.
Um,
In the ledger or where?
in the coffee cafe deposit?
No. So the deposit here is deposit that you put in your checking account. That deposit goes to the landlord's money, bank account, whatever, because that's their that's on their end, that's the money that they're holding on for us.
Okay,
Okay?
I think.
Okay. No worries. Okay? All right. So let's see what is next. Okay. So here we decide to hire Kim Robinson, okay, to do some interior design consultation. Okay?
I'll be back. My dog is crying.
Okay, no worries. In this case, if I hired Kim Robinson to go ahead and take a look at my store and give me some ideas for how to design my store, do I need to journalize this transaction?
If you paid him, yes.
Did we pay them?
I don't know. It says sales receipt. Oh no, that's a purchase. No, so no, we did not.
No. In this case, we just hired them, right? They haven't billed us on what the consultation was amount for. There was all the person did was did the person even complete the job? We don't know. All we did was hire them. Did they come to the store today and do the job for us? The assumption is yes, but in this case, they didn't bill us, right? We don't know how much we owe this person, right? And no money was paid. So in this case, all we did was simply just hire them, all right? That means we should be expecting a bill from Kim Robinson soon because Kim decided to do some service for us. Okay? All right? So in this case, no transaction is necessary here, but now we know we have to look forward for Kim Robinson's invoice. Okay? So next thing that happened was we actually went to Computers R Us and we end up purchasing a nice little office supplies and stuff. So in this case right here is our sales receipt for this sales receipt here, which was we went to the store and purchased a computer and a printer set. So here, right, on June 5th, this is my receipt here. I bought a computer for $16.95. I bought a printer for $350. That came out a total of $2,045. I got taxed 8.25%, which came out to be $168.71. And the total amount due was $2,213.71. And I wrote a check for $1,502, right? Your receipt will always indicate how you pay. So in this case, this is an example of my receipt, and it shows me that I paid with check number 1502, right? So how do I break this down? What did I buy? What is it that I bought?
Computer and printer.
You bought a computer and printer. Let's go check your chart of accounts. Does that exist? In this case, let's see. It's an asset, a fixed asset. Let's take a look. It's an office equipment. So do I have an account for a computer and an account for a printer? Yes, you do. $14.10 for the computer, $14.20 for the printer. So that means, yes, my accounts do exist. Okay? Computer and printer. Okay? And of course, I made a payment, right, by writing a check. So that means it's going to come out from my checking account. Okay? So 14.10, 14.20, and 10.100. Okay? So let's take a look at this receipt. Okay? I purchased my equipment, or in this case, my office equipment, my computer, my printer, right? This is their price. Now, because I went to the store and I had to pay something in order to take it back to my store, how am I going to figure this number out? What is this payment that I had to pay in order to get this asset to my store?
$22,1371.
That's my total, grand total that I paid, but what did I have to pay into in order to take these items to my store? What was I charged? The question I'm asking is not very
I don't-
hard.
Are you talking about splitting up the money?
What do you mean by splitting up the money?
Well, splitting up the tax so that you can split up the correct amounts. Is that what you're referring to or no?
Correct. In this case, in order for me to leave the store with a computer and a printer, I was charged sales tax. Now, what do I do with that sales tax? In this case, is that going to be considered a part of the cost of the asset, or is that going to be an expense that you just have to pay?
Part of cost.
It's going to be considered part of the cost of the asset, right? When we learned this in chapter 11, right? When we buy our fixed assets, that means it's going to be whatever cost it takes to get the asset not just to the store, but ready for service. In this case, right? It's a computer and it's a printer. All you got to do is just plug into the wall. So it's already ready, made for service. So there's no extra things I have to do there. However, I have to include tax because in this case, that's what I got charged for making a purchase of these items. I have to split the tax. Now, in this case, how do I split the tax? Am I going to split it right in the middle and distribute it to the computer and the printer? How would I split the tax?
You figure it out. So 1695 times the 8.25%.
Correct. You need to prorate it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rest of the side of my journal to go ahead and compute my numbers here. Okay? So in this case, right, my computer was a total of $16.95 and my printer was a total of $350, which gave me a total of $20.45. Now, in this case, I have to prorate it because tax is also based on an individual level as well, right? So in this case, I need to figure out how much tax is going to actually go towards my computer and how much tax is actually going to go towards my printer. So by doing so, like we mentioned before, you're going to take the actual sales price of $16.95 and you're going to multiply it by the 0.825%. Okay? And same thing for your printer. You're going to take your 350 times the tax of 8.25% to get a grand total of these numbers here. Now, in this case, I have 139.83, which we can round to 84. And then I have 28 I'm sorry, yeah, 28.87.5. So that means I can round that also up because of the rules of rounding, right? But in this case, would that give me the same exact result? If I were to say my asset was 1695 plus 13984, okay? And then my other asset for my printer was $350 plus $28.88. Is that going to be the exact amount that I actually paid for? No, of course not. In this case, it's a little over. Okay, I think I made a typo here. 350 plus 28.88. No, in this case, I did not pay 2271.72. How much did I actually pay? I paid 1 penny less. And that happens when you buy many items, right? The tax is based on the total amount of your total cost or your total sales, right? The total purchase. In this case, I didn't buy these individually. If I did buy them individually, then yes, due to the rules of rounding, the government's going to round the money as well, right? That's just how the accounting system works, is that you're always going to round up, especially when it comes to tax, okay? But in this case, I did not buy it separately. I bought it together. So therefore, I have to take a look at this and I have to distribute where that extra penny is, and I have to take out one of the extra pennies somewhere else. So in this case, which one am I going to be most likely going to do? This is 838 versus 875. Which one are you most likely going to round up?
The 838.
838, right? That's definitely a little more than 50 cents, point or 0.5 of a penny, right? So in this case, that's where I'm going to round my number up. And then for the printer, unfortunately, this is going to be rounded down. So instead of 28.88, it's going to be for 28.87. So 350 plus 28.87, and that's going to give you your total cost here of the 2213.71. Okay? So that's why it's very crucial that you do check your numbers very carefully, because rounding is one of the problematic things when it comes to calculating your calculations. Right? So in this case, I distributed my tax. That means the cost of the computer is a grand total of $1834.84, and then the cost of my printer is going to be $378.87, which, right, if I add those numbers up together, gives me my total amount that I paid with a check of $2213.71. Okay, and that's exactly what we had to do. We had to calculate how we got to this number. Okay, so now let's go ahead and fill in my description. Okay, but I need to write my check number, because in this case, right, I'm backtracking my purchase, right? At time that I bought my computer and printer, I wrote the check and they processed it and they put it on a receipt. So in this case, I need to go record that check, because that's what happened, right? I wrote a check. So I'm going to record it for the 2213.71. And who did I write this check out to? What's my store called?
Computers RS.
Okay. To Computers R Us. Okay. For $22,213.71. And I used check number 1502, right? That was given because That's what was written on your receipt. Okay. So therefore, let's go ahead and finish off my general journal by completing a description of what this purchase was for. In this case, you don't need to identify that you bought a printer and you bought a computer because your journal already says that you debited an asset for computer and a debited an asset for the printer. No need to repeat information that you already know. But here's a few things that you should put down. You should definitely put down the vendor because what if you have issues with that computer? It was defective. It won't start up. You're gonna have to take that back to the vendor and say, "Hey, you sold me a faulty computer. I want a refund." That is like the most important thing that you need to do is keep track of who you purchase items from because at the end of the day, you have that possibility to return those items to your vendors. So in this case, computers are us, okay? And in this case, you can also put in that you wrote check number 1502, okay? Nothing really else that's actually there just because that's pretty much all the information you need, right? The vendor and what check number you use to pay for this. Because it's straightforward that you bought a printer and you bought a computer. Okay? So then, now we finished our journal. Next step we got to do is update our ledger because now we bought some fixed assets and we spent money to do so. Now again, when I arrived to my ledger, right, because the last page I left off was my checking account, should I just do my checking account now? In the real world, technically, yes, you can. But that means you skipped over your assets. Now, in this case, there's only 3 accounts I'm dealing with. But when we deal with sales, right, we're going to be looking at 10 accounts at one time. Okay? Just like the one that we started out with, we looked at like 6 or 7 different accounts at one time. So again, rule of thumb here is I'm going to go in the exact order. Okay? So first thing I acquired was a computer. Okay? I'm going to scroll down and locate my computer. Okay? Which is considered an office equipment. So here you go. My computer is here. Okay, computer, account number 1410. And I'm going to go ahead and indicate that today is the 5th. I keep writing the 4th. Okay. What do you want to add in here? You can say what the original sales price was, which was $16.95 plus 8.25% tax. Okay, which resulted in I think it was 130. $139.84. Yeah, my bad. So the tax was 139. Okay, undo. So the sales tax was $139.84. Okay, so that's something you can put in there. You don't really necessarily need it as long you could just put what the asset cost you. Okay, post reference general journal number 1. Okay, and because I acquired an asset for $1834.84. Therefore, my account balance in my computer is for $1834.84. Now, I've mentioned before, right? This one is already ready for service. All you got to do is just plug it into the wall. Okay? You don't need maintenance to set up your computer. All you do is answer the questions to turn on your computer, and that's straightforward. You don't need to pay anybody to do that. Okay? So in this case, this computer is ready for service. Okay. And then of course I also bought my printer. My printer, okay, for the 5th, okay, it cost me $350 plus 8.25%. Okay, tax, which resulted in a total of $28.87. Okay, this happened on my first general journal, so that caused my printer to be $387.87. Okay. All right, which then made my account balance in my printers to give me a value of $378.87. Okay. Last thing I have to recognize here is going to be my checking account, right? Because I spent more money. On the 5th, again, the only information I just need here is just my checking number, just because I can easily look at my check register and figure out the details from there of who I paid, when I paid, how much I paid. Okay? Again, general journal number 1, but this time I credited my account for $2,213.71. So therefore, because the formula I put in there and I dragged it down to the bottom gives me an end result of $13,911.29, right? If you want to do simple math, you started out with 16,125 and you subtracted 2,213.71 to get to this number right here. Okay? So that means the next time I have money, right, I have at least 13,000 left in my bank account. All right. Okay. Now again, we dealt with a vendor, right? We have proof of a transaction. We have a receipt. So therefore, right, we bought equipment from a person. So in this case, it is very important that we make record note of who our vendor was, right? In this case, we purchased this from Computers R Us. Okay, on the 5th, what did we buy? We bought a computer, okay, for a total amount of the $1834.84, right, which includes tax. And I bought a printer for $378.87, okay, because that's going to tell me if I do make a return, this is the money that we're going to get back. And of course, I'm going to make a note here that I also made a payment using check number 1502. Invoice number. I paid at time of service. So therefore, my invoice number is going to be whatever receipt number I got the items for. That's proof of a transaction. So in this case, my receipt number for this particular transaction was 84143. Okay, that was my receipt number. So that's what I'm going to put here, 81143. Okay. Post reference once again, we are still working on our very first journal here. Okay. In this case, we paid at time of service. So therefore, there's no possibility of having a terms date, right? Because we don't owe Computers R Us, right? We're only writing it down in here because what is the chances that we have to go back to the store and either exchange or return the product? You have the information right here. However, terms does not apply for something that you buy in store. Right? You didn't make a prepaid account for them. Okay, but here the receipt amount was for the 2213.71. Okay, we haven't had the chance of whether we're going to make a return or not, right? This is for the future in case we do. Then it's going to decrease your account. But in this case, you're going to get money back in that case. Because we made a payment using check number 1502, we paid the 2213.71. Okay? So once again, because this is looking at the perspective of an accounts payable, right? If my invoice amount was for 2213.71 and I made a payment for 2213.71, that means I owe Computers R Us nothing. Okay? So once again, that formula is going to be your invoice amount, subtract any prepaid, subtract any returns or allowances, subtract your discounts, and subtract your payments to get you equal to 0. Okay? Again, even if you made a sales receipt and you paid at time of service, use this formula because it's going to be, what if I go to Computers R Us and buy something else on an account? Then that formula is going to stay the same. Okay? So we're practicing uniformity and as well as sticking with one method and being consistent throughout this entire process. Okay? So there we go. We went from journal to the ledger to the subledger. And now we can say we are done with this transaction. Any questions?
No.
Okay. So, looks like it's 11:18, so I'm going to stop here for today because the next section's going to be a long one. So, I'm going to stop here, okay? And then we'll continue the rest of Coffee Cafe tomorrow.